Afternoon. Okay, in game 9, Rybka hit back with its first win. The final match score was +7 to Houdini. It was 23.5, 16.5. So it was game 9 where Rybka playing white kicked off with d4. So Houdini's far from invincible. It's beatable. Any engine is beatable. That's the amazing depth of chess that even now with hardware and software there's still problems, and there's always going to be a problem if you think about it, because each different opening system creates imbalances in the position, which are potentially loss makers or win makers, these imbalances. And in this opening, Houdini's opening might be a little bit suspect for the imbalances in theory, and as long as opening books are chosen for them, maybe the engines are in effect playing with handicaps if the opening's not particularly good. So here after d6 we have a kind of Benoni system, knight c3 g6. Okay, a kind of delayed Benoni, because if black plays for e6 and ed later, we'll be left with a change in pawn structure where white has an advantage in theory in the centre and d6 being a potential target. But to compensate that, black will have dark square weaknesses and seam out an e-file pressure. Pardon me. e4, bishop g7. This is the delayed Benoni though. I played this actually against Michael Harris, the delayed Benoni. I think it was one of Raymond Keene's suggestions in 1989 when I won the Lloyds Bank Junior, sponsored by Lloyds Bank. Sorry, no, I didn't beat Harris. I drew with him quite comfortably with a delayed e6, I remember. So bishop g4, because the bishop's not going to be that good in this structure. It's all about dark square control. This move, if it gets rid of this f3 knight, then later there's no d to c4, which is usually good when cd5 happens to target d6. But also it sort of increases the pressure on the dark squares in theory. So usually it's a good idea to do this. So h3, even losing time just to kick the bishop, but h3 could be a useful move in its own right later. And now knight d7. So visually, okay, here we could say, does black stand any worse? Maybe not, one could argue, but it's going into that Benoni setup, which I think a lot of GMs are increasingly distrusting. So we have here, after knight d7, the threat of knight e5, and anticipation of that, this queen retreat. So now we have e6, and now we're getting the Benoni setup. Okay, but with a big difference actually. After e takes d5, this is a big structural difference from a normal Benoni. E takes d5 is chosen by Rybka. Now, I could argue actually that c takes d5 might not be as effective here, because there's no knight to d2 to c4. So is it useful vacating the c4 square? And black's got that pawn majority on the queen side potentially, and use of the e-file, and this pawn might be a bit weak. So actually Rybka's chosen a seemingly more sterile continuation where the pawn structure is more symmetrical. There's no pawn majority for black on the queen side. Both sides are showing the e-file. So what would white achieve from doing this? There's a kind of bind on the position here, and white does have the two bishops still. So we see black still playing on the dark squares now with his next move, knight h5, queen c2, and now a celebration on the dark squares, bishop e5. Trying to mark that f4 square. Nice games with John Nunn in Benoni where he sort of seals the dark squares. Okay. And f4 is probably not recommendable. It would weaken the king, weaken this diagonal. There's an immediate check if f4. That could be quite unpleasant, along with things like queen h4 even later. So rook e1, rook e8 is played, and it seems black's got a seemingly pleasant position. Bishop d2, f5 even. So another pawn move. So the committal engine in this game in terms of pawn structure is Houdini. Is that going to be a recurring pattern of these strong engine versus engine games, that it's to do with pawn structure and pawn structure weaknesses? Well, Philidor did say the pawns are the soul of chess, so it will be quite funny and ironic that that was the case, that in particular it's the pawn structure dictating results a lot of the time. But here, you know, is d6 an exploitable weakness with a pawn being on c4? How can white possibly use the d6 pawn as a potential weakness here? You can't arrange a bishop to come to f4. That's been made clear from black, that the f4 square is in black's control. So if you can't do that, how would you do it? Well, it's interesting. First, this move bishop e2 chases away that knight actually from f4, and it now places the bishop on f3. So the light square bishop, okay, it's blocked in by its own pawn, but it is keeping control of some central squares, and it is potentially useful strengthening of this diagonal, just in case e6 is useful. Maybe the exploitable weakness is twofold here, e6 as well as d6, because if a piece can land on e6 now, there's going to be repercussions on this diagonal opening up for that light square bishop, which currently is a passive bishop. Rook e7, and now we also get a clue that there's another way of cracking this structure. Rook ab1, as though b4 is going to be a powerful strategic punch to open up the b file, and again try and extend the scope of the bishop. If there's ever a d takes, there'll be a d6. So this puts black's position in a kind of risky state here, pending state, because where is actually black's counterplay now? Okay, he's got a fine looking bishop on e5, but where are the pawn breaks now? It would be difficult for black to arrange pawn breaks, whilst white at leisure is cracking open the position with b4 here. So black is forced to kind of wait. There's this kind of waiting move, queen f8. But I guess it means black can now double the rooks and also potentially create a battery on the diagonal maybe, or even the queen coming out to h6 in some lines. So knight b5 though, immediate threat, knight c7 to e6. In fact, then there's the question, why actually could black not have considered here playing a6? I think the answer must be with b4, but I'm going to check it because it's creating another permanent weakness. Okay, no need to play b4 immediately. Maybe. No, I can't see anything too clear-cut wrong with the move a6. Okay, engine off there. So let's go back to the game. So we have curious queen f8, knight b5, and the queen just retreating back to protect the c7 point. So now, after queen b3, black is tempted for a6 in any case. So queen c7, and this potential break is totally ruled out now of b5 by playing a4. After rook f8, now we see knight e2. So knight e2 is going to maybe exchange off this bishop for this bishop to make black's position look a little bit less dynamic. That nicely centralized bishop for this not so centralized bishop. Okay, so queen b6, and then the queen's come off b3. Nothing to write home about here, or is there? There was another point of knight e2. It wasn't just to support bishop f4s, it was to support knight f4 to e6. e6 is a major positional issue here, and it's quite quickly illustrated actually. Knight f4 now is coming up, knight f4. And this causes black a first major concession. There's no way it wants a knight coming to e6. Okay, to us it looks horrendous, but to the engine it must have some tactical implication. It doesn't care how it looks, but it must have some tactical implication not to take off the knight here. Let's give an example. Okay, we can sense that a knight coming to e6 is horrible. Let's just give a token move and allow it. So knight e6, king f7. What would happen here? With that knight on e6, now b4 can happen. And I think it's basically more painful because c5 is now supported by the knight on e6. So they say rook c8. Or even b5 or a5. a5. Another token move. Takes. Oh, I see. And now we get an implication here. Rook takes e5. That's something in concrete to give white an advantage. So knight takes c5 here. Because then if rook takes c5, there's bishop b4. And it's all crashing through. So b7 is a major issue. Coordination of bishop and rook here. So we see that, yeah, it's not just horrendous looking. It actually carries big practical value, getting the knight to e6 for the b4 break. So this is the beginning of the end for Houdini for a change, because it's giving up that seemingly precious dark squared bishop, and in the process d6 is looking like more of an exploitable weakness now. So white has the two bishops, it's against the two knights, but knight e5. Does black have compensation here? Well, white's prepared to allow a fracture of its own pawn structure to increase its emphasis on these theoretically weak squares. So rook e8, and there we see a5 binding down, fixing down these pawns, and now we see b4. Okay, so after c takes, a rook's blasting down on the poor b pawn, and white doesn't mind now doubling the pawns here because it's all about exploitable weaknesses and pressure. Doubling the pawns, big deal. What's going to exploit the double pawn or the isolated pawn here? Nothing much. Black's not in a position to do that. White's in a better position to exploit these weaknesses. So the overall trade-off for a bit of structural damage reduces black's dynamism, emphasises more these weaknesses as being more exploitable than before. Okay, it's still a long way off though. Rook d7, engine off. So the king comes in a little bit, and now we see this invasion move, rook e6. For the first time there's a big tactical direct threat of just winning that pawn. So the black pieces are starting to be depressed about it, moving passively. King comes in. Rook a4 defending both pawns against that rook. King comes further in. Where is the king going? Okay, so knight g7, the rook's evicted. Bishop's kicked back a bit, bishop g5. Now we see rook b6. So the king actually on d3 is doing a fine job in freeing up an entire rook because it's protecting the c4 pawn, rather amusingly. So knight g7, and now bishop f4. So these guys are under fire. This guy's protected by white's own king. So white has the advantage in terms of the king being really useful for freeing up an entire rook. Pardon me. So black's passive. Is this the end of Houdini at move 42? The answer to life, the universe, and everything. Sorry. So knight e8, rook eb8, eb1 rather. So black's seriously getting tied down now to b7. Okay, so there's two seemingly exploitable weaknesses, but are they? How does white break black down here? We'll have these situations in our own club games like I have in the Hearts League, where yeah, I've got these weaknesses, and there's always this recurring question, you know, are they just visually weak or are they actually exploitable? The proof is in the pudding, as they say. Where is the proof? Well, the king now goes to d4. So what on earth does this mean, king d4? Does it mean there's going to be a sack on d6 with c5 supported by the king? Okay, we'll find out. King g8. Actually, it doesn't mean anything yet. Rook e1. So some toying with black. Rook e6. So some progress has been made now to put 3 pieces on the poor d6 pawn. So black's really tied down, and now there comes bishop g5, and now rook e7, getting off a pair of rooks. So that pain in black's position is not going away. That d6 pawn is not going away. So pieces are coming off, now after this h6, which actually is a mysterious pawn sack from Houdini. Why did it feel the need now to play h6? Okay, let's try and answer this probably quite a difficult tactical question. Is black in a kind of virtual zugzwang here? If we take rook e7 as an example, bishop e7, how is black defending d6? It's falling off. It's fallen off. So how did this situation arise where d6 is falling off? Because black's in zugzwang here. This rook can't move without losing this rook. This knight can't move, can it, without losing just taking on d6, or just taking on b7 first, now taking on d6. So rook e7 is the final nail in the coffin here, it seems. It's funny that, isn't it? Exchanging off one pair of rooks in such a manner exposes d6 as finally an actual exploitable weakness, forcing a serious material loss from black. If we contrast it to this position, you know, some of us might have felt, you know, what's the plan here? How do we exploit d6 if black's going to huddle up like that? But the solution seems simple. This bishop g5 and now rook e7. Wow! And d6 is finally falling. This is the case where this bishop has got a nice target on its own colour. Otherwise it's a pretty dumb bishop. It's got no targets. But yeah, the knight's kind of helpless here. Okay, I mean, these pawns, as I say, who cares? You know, they look crap, they look ugly, but who cares? It's these guys which are the real issues, the exploitable issues. If chess teaches us one thing, it's about this, you know, not being deceived by appearances. You know, like Susan Boyle, you know, everyone thought, you know, she wasn't going to be that good and she was brilliant. Yeah? So is it actually an exploitable weakness or not? You know, double pawns in the bigger scheme of things here, it doesn't matter. So the first concession was forced. Here. Funny enough, why was it though? Here's another question. Why was it here after king d3? I think it's this position which actually black essentially is in zugzwang, because let's say also king h8. Let's investigate king h8 again. Okay, well, there's rook c7, there's rook takes b7 as well. Rook takes b7 is actually the stronger move here, so that's 7th rank pressure as well. Sorry, I think I'm starting to see the point now retrospectively that actually it's the invasion to the 7th rank. This invasory move here not only knocks out potentially a key defender, but it's also about b7. Pardon me. b7's a major exploitable weakness. So it's two weaknesses. Maybe it's the thing about two weaknesses really tying down black that overloads the black defences here. So one of them's going to fall. Okay. So king d3, black appears to be in a zugzwang. Now the reason why king d3 was played was because otherwise it would have been rook takes c4 check. Yes, I've discovered now why this is zugzwang. King d3 zugzwang. Now why isn't rook takes c4 possible here? Rook takes e8, I guess, and that's not without checking with an engine. Give me some points here, guys. Rook takes e8. So basically Houdini was put into a zugzwang with king d3. Finally, something's going to crack from this moment. This is the key moment in the match where Rybka is finally crushed. So it has to give up a pawn, and this isn't a clever pawn sack. This is a desperate pawn sack. So rook takes c7, bishop takes h6, and still that bishop has still got the target here on the dark square. The rook is still tying down black to the two weaknesses. So rook h7. Houdini says, but in fact the isolated h-pawn is weak. Okay, it's taken. But king e3 now. This king has provided great comforts and opportunities to white in this game, taking care, nurturing specific pawns when needed. So rook h4, now rook takes b7. Rook on the 7th again. D6 still weak. Now another pawn sack to get hold of C4. So there's a kind of compromised exchange of prisoners going on, which Nimzovich would say about what, you know, you exchange prisoners, you're exchanging your exploitable weaknesses with your opponent. But it's still in White's favour. Surely it's still in White's favour, because Rook B6 is double attacking these guys kind of viciously all the time. So the Rook's kind of very, very powerful in this type of position. So Knight C7 finally giving up protecting D6. D6 is taken. So now Houdini is 2 pawns down. Can Houdini escape this one? Well, F4, White's in no rush, getting hold of key squares, supporting the bishop. Check. Rook C5, okay, double attacking White's 2 problem pawns, but check. Now, and the point of F4 is revealed now, that the bishop doesn't have to move, but it does actually to attack the rook. Okay, if Rook takes A5, Rook takes C7. If Rook takes D5, then Rook takes C7. So basically, this isn't looking too good. Black can't win any of the pawns, so Rook C3 and now D6. So this is a major passed pawn potentially. At the moment it's temporarily blockaded. So Rook A7. It's going to crash through, winning a piece now. What can Houdini do about it? D7. It's winning a piece. The whole piece is going to drop. There was a last trick here maybe. Why didn't White queen immediately? Actually it wasn't. White could have also just queened here to win a piece, but our computers are playing the most clinical moves all the time, so it doesn't have to do it here. If it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to. It just plays bishop g5 first. More accurate in some way. Check. Sorry, no, no check. Check wasn't played. Just Rook a4. So Rook a8. White secured victory here because it's winning a piece with d8. So finally, actually, Rook takes e8 is clever, just to completely simplify the position. And here now Houdini resigns. It's +5 for White. So what we get in my long commentary for this game, which I hope you excuse, is this idea again, this big question in chess about exploitable weaknesses versus visual weaknesses. But in the Benoni, you know, this bishop exchange, usually White will play actually c takes d5. So it seems to spoil the fun a bit to keep the symmetrical pawn structure. It's like people playing the exchange French, playing this move e takes d5. And you might wonder, well, you know, this bishop isn't that good surely here. But the thing is, without the knight on f3 to come to c4, you know, maybe this is the right decision in many respects. If Black's dark square counterplay doesn't add up to much, and White can get a bishop to f3 and aim for the b4 break, then this seems very good strategically and tactically, playing for the b4 break. And also that e6 is constantly a major issue. Nothing could have been done about it to stop a knight coming to e6, it seems, apart from giving up that seemingly valuable bishop here. If the knight came to e6, horrendous looking and also horrendous tactically, because it is supporting b5s. So the dark square bishop's given up. So here we see the beginning of the end, I think. Easier said than done, though, to finish off Black. Needs some further concessions from White, accepting double pawns, for example. And the magic, pardon me, one of the magical things here is the use of the White king to avoid having to tie down entire rooks. So the king coming to d3 is good stuff from Rybka here. Really good stuff. So Black's rooks are getting increasingly tied down, and they sort of reshuffle themselves on the battery on c4, but it's not enough. Now here actually, was there an opportunity? Here's one question. Was there an opportunity for Rook dc7 here? Again, there's this quiet step back move king d3. So if rook c4, there's always rook e8. So the king can be carnivorous in some lines. So it wasn't chosen there, but now later it's forcibly kind of chosen to double rooks like that. And king d3 leaves black in a bad state with threats of rook takes b7. Well, that's the main principal threat, b7. Okay, so this is actually just lost here at move 49. Completely lost. But there's a bit of a resourceful idea of h6 to try and munch some white pawns, like this h3 pawn. And then the c4 pawn with g5. So more ingeniousness, really, to get at some white pawns. But the chief trump card here is that d pawn. Strong d pawn. It's supposed to be one of the strongest passed pawns you can have in chess, the passed d pawn. And here it's used to forcibly like win further material. So I hope there's something instructive in this game. I think these are quite instructive games myself. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.